Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. You guys sent some really fascinating stuff, and this time we're diving into Lisa B. Moschini's Drawing the Mind, Art Therapy with a Difficult Client.
Yeah, it's a really great book. It digs deep into how art therapy can be used to help us understand these really complex clients, especially clients who maybe have difficulty opening up in a traditional talk therapy setting.
Okay, so I know a little bit about art therapy, but for someone who's coming in fresh, what's the general idea?
So art therapy basically uses art as like this tool for communication and self-expression. It's rooted in this idea that sometimes, especially for people who have experienced trauma or have mental health conditions or just struggle to put their feelings into words, well, sometimes words aren't enough.
Makes sense? So it's not about like judging someone's art skills or anything, but more about what the art reveals about what's going on
Yeah.
inside, right?
Exactly. It's not about aesthetics. The art created in therapy is more about giving us this like window into the client's their thoughts, emotions, experiences. It's a way to kind of bypass the defenses and the intellectualization and get to something a bit deeper.
I like that, a window. And the book seems to focus on this idea of art as a way to access the unconscious. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Okay, so think about it this way. When you're creating art, you're often engaging with, feelings and memories and sensations that you might not be able to easily put into words. So your conscious mind might be, choosing colors or shaping clay, but at the same time, your unconscious mind is kind of free to express itself through the imagery, through the symbols that come out.
So it's like art is this bridge between the conscious and unconscious parts of ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what makes art therapy so powerful because it allows therapists to uncover these hidden emotions, help people process trauma, and get insights that you might not be able to access just through talking.
That makes a lot of sense. The book is full of these really interesting examples, and one that really stood out to me was this client who meticulously added red glitter to his mask. Even though it didn't really have any visual effect,
Yeah.
what could that kind of detail tell us?
It's those little moments that make art therapy so fascinating. It's not always about the big picture. Sometimes the most revealing things are in those tiny details. Like in that case, the author suggests that the glitter, even though it's invisible to anyone looking at the mask, might represent a hidden meaning or like a desire to conceal something. Almost like the client is saying, okay, there's something here I want to keep hidden, but I also need to acknowledge it somehow.
It really makes you wonder how much we reveal without even realizing it through the creative choices that we make, even outside of a therapy setting.
Absolutely. We see art and creative expression all around us all the time, from like doodles on a notepad to the way someone decorates their home. Having an understanding of the principles of art therapy can actually give you a new way to look at those expressions and understand the people around you a little bit better.
The book also goes into symbolism in art. Is it really like a secret code that needs to be cracked?
Well, not exactly a secret code, but symbols in art can tell us a lot about a person's inner world. They often tap into these, deeply rooted cultural and historical associations, so they add this whole other layer of meaning to the artwork. Like fire, for example. Fire in a drawing might be connected to things like power or sexuality and destruction, but it can also be a sign of past experiences of abuse.
Isn't there a risk of like overinterpreting symbols? I mean, how do therapists make sure they're not projecting their own biases onto the client's work?
That's a really important question, and it really shows why expertise and careful consideration is so important in art therapy. Skilled art therapists are actually trained to interpret these symbols within the context of the client's individual history, their culture, their current situation. So they don't just jump to conclusions based on a single symbol. They look for patterns, recurring themes, and connections to the client's verbal and nonverbal communication. It's this delicate balance between observation, interpretation, and an open dialogue with the client.
It sounds like there's a real art to art therapy. The book also talks about how children's art changes as they develop and what that can tell us.
Right. And those changes can actually tell us a lot about their cognitive and emotional growth. For instance, as children get older, their drawings often transition from simple shapes to these more detailed figures, and that shows an increasing awareness of themselves and the world around them.
So even just like a simple stick figure drawing can tell us something. What about those developmental leaps where kids suddenly start using perspective in their drawings or stop drawing transparent figures? What's happening there?
So those shifts in how a child expresses themselves artistically are often reflections of their developing cognitive abilities, like the emergence of perspective. That shows a growing understanding of spatial relationships, being able to represent three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional surface. And then similarly, when the transparencies disappear, it suggests that the child is starting to grasp object permanence, that objects exist even when they're hidden.
That's so interesting. I never really thought about how those little details could reveal so much about a child's development.
Yeah, and it's not just about children. These developmental stages can actually be really helpful in understanding adults who may be experiencing, say, developmental delays or regressions because of trauma or a mental illness. Their art can offer clues about where they are emotionally and cognitively, which can then help therapists tailor their approach to meet those specific needs.
So it's not just about expressing feelings, it's a way to assess someone's psychological state. Are there specific tests that therapists use for that?
There are. The book mentions projective art tests, and those are designed to help reveal underlying emotions and personality traits and even potential psychological issues.
Projective art tests. What are those exactly?
Projective art tests are basically assessments that use ambiguous stimuli, like simple prompts or abstract images, to get a creative response from the client. The idea is that by projecting their own thoughts and feelings onto these ambiguous things, the clients reveal something about their inner world that they might not even be aware of.
So like if I was asked to draw a house, a tree, and a person, which is a classic projective test, what could my drawing reveal?
Well, in the house tree person test, each element is supposed to symbolize different aspects of the self. The house often represents the person's home life and their family relationships. The tree symbolizes feelings of growth and stability. And the person represents, well, the individual's self-image, how they see themselves in the world. So, for example, if someone draws a very large house, it might suggest that they're focused on fantasy, or they need to escape from reality. Whereas a small, closed-off house could indicate feelings of insecurity or withdrawal.
That's incredible. It's like art therapy is this combination of detective work and emotional exploration. You're looking for clues, you're looking for patterns, but you're also creating a safe space for those deeper emotions and experiences to come out. It's not just about analyzing, it's about healing too.
Exactly. And that's what makes art therapy so unique and so powerful. It's not about simply diagnosing a problem. It's about providing a safe and supportive environment for people to explore their inner world, express themselves in a truly authentic way, and ultimately find a path toward healing and growth.
Now the book goes beyond just the theory and looks at real-life examples. You mentioned John earlier, a client who struggled with schizophrenia, and how his art gave therapists this new way to connect with him. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so John's case is a really powerful illustration of how art therapy can bridge the gap between the therapist and a client who may have difficulty communicating verbally. Judd used art to express his delusions and desires, which gave the therapist a way to understand his experiences from his perspective. Instead of dismissing his delusions as just symptoms, the therapist could engage with them through John's art. And that created a space for dialogue and understanding that just wouldn't have been possible through words alone.
So in his case, art wasn't just about expressing himself, it was a tool for building connection and empathy.
Absolutely. And the book emphasizes that this can apply to clients from all different backgrounds, not just those with severe mental illnesses. Art therapy can be so helpful for anyone who struggles to articulate their feelings, anyone who needs to process trauma, or just explore their inner world in a creative and safe way.
I'm already starting to see how understanding these principles could be valuable even outside of a therapy setting. It's like you said earlier, we all have that inner artist just waiting to be unleashed.
That's right. We all have that capacity for creative expression. And whether we realize it or not, we're always communicating through a mix of words in this unspoken language. Learning to recognize those nonverbal cues, those symbolic expressions, can really help us understand ourselves and the people around us on a much deeper level.
Okay, you've definitely convinced me. So far, we've talked about individual art therapy, but I'm really curious about how these principles apply to groups and families.
Oh, that's where things get really interesting. So while individual art therapy gives us this powerful look into a single person's world, group sessions offer this unique opportunity to see the interplay of individual expression within a social context. It's like watching a story unfold on multiple levels.
So how does art therapy actually work in a group setting? Is it like a free-for-all, or is there structured activities?
It can be kind of both, actually. Sometimes group sessions involve a shared art project, so everyone's contributing to like a single piece. Other times, individuals might create their own pieces, but based on a common theme or like a prompt.
I see. The book mentions this idea of mutual storytelling in art therapy. What is that?
Oh, mutual storytelling is really interesting. It's where art basically becomes this language for a shared narrative.
Hmm.
So it's not just the client expressing themselves through their art, but the therapist actually participates too by creating a story that builds on the client's themes and symbols.
That's cool. Do you have an example of how that might work?
Yeah. So the book describes this client named Randy. Randy had a really difficult childhood, a lot of trauma. And through his drawings and the stories that he would tell about them, he created this sort of fantastical island of guidance. It was populated by these characters that represented different parts of himself and his struggles.
So his artwork was like a visual map of his inner world.
Yeah, exactly. And by engaging with those characters and those scenarios through storytelling, both Randy and the therapist could kind of explore his feelings and experiences from a safer distance. The therapist's role was to build on Randy's narrative, offer alternative perspectives, help him reframe his experiences in a way that could promote healing.
It's amazing how art can create that distance, right?
Uh,
Allowing someone to approach really difficult emotions without feeling overwhelmed by them.
That's one of the really powerful things about art therapy. It allows this level of emotional processing that could be too intense or challenging if you were just trying to use words. And it's not just for kids, you know. The book emphasizes that this mutual storytelling technique can be really effective with adults, especially those who might find traditional talk therapy a bit too difficult.
I could see that. We all use stories to make sense of our lives, right?
Mm.
And if those stories are full of pain or negative things, it can be really hard to imagine a different path. Art therapy seems to offer this way to kind of rewrite those narratives.
That's a great way to put it. Art therapy, especially through things like mutual storytelling, creates this unique space where you can actually explore those narratives, challenge them, and eventually even create new stories that are more empowering and in line with your goals for healing and growth.
So we've talked about mutual storytelling, but you mentioned earlier that group sessions offer a different dynamic than individual therapy. Can you say more about what makes group art therapy so unique?
Well, imagine the power of being able to express yourself, but amplified by being able to share your experiences and having the support of the whole group. Being in a room with other people who are going through similar struggles can create a feeling of validation, even hope. And then the act of creating art together, being able to share those creations and reflecting on the process as a group, all of that can really deepen those connections and lead to some really powerful insights.
I can imagine. The book mentions some specific exercises that are used in group therapy. What are some of those?
One that really stood out to me was this thing called paired communication drawing. It's this exercise where two people sit back to back. One person has a simple drawing and the other one has a blank piece of paper. And the person with the drawing has to give verbal instructions to the other person to try and help them recreate the drawing based on just those instructions.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine all the hilarious misinterpretations that must happen with that.
Oh, it can be really funny. But beyond the laughter, it actually highlights these communication patterns, the importance of being able to give clear instructions, and also how our perceptions can sometimes be different from reality. It kind of shows the challenges of expressing ourselves clearly and the potential for misunderstanding in any kind of communication, not just in art.
So it's fun, but there's a deeper psychological purpose behind it too.
Yeah.
What are some other examples?
The book also talks about how art can be used to explore themes of empathy and self-disclosure in group therapy. There's this one exercise where the group members create artwork that represents a gift they'd like to give to another member to kind of help them succeed. It's a way to encourage them to think about each other's strengths and challenges, and it builds a sense of empathy and support.
That's so cool. It's like a way to combine creativity and emotional intelligence.
Right. And then there are also exercises that focus on self-disclosure. One example is having group members decorate a box. On the outside, they decorate it to represent their public persona, how they present themselves to the world. But then inside, they hide a secret that they think might surprise people.
That's interesting. It's like a visual representation of all the layers that we all have.
Yeah.
And sharing those secrets in a safe space like that can really help build trust and understanding between the members.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that all of these exercises are designed to be processed and discussed as a group. That gives the members a chance to reflect on what they experienced, offer each other feedback, and learn from each other's perspectives.
It's not just about the art, it's about the conversations and the connections that happen around it.
That's exactly right. It's the combination of creative expression and having those facilitated discussions that makes group art therapy such a powerful tool for growth and healing. It creates this space where people can really feel seen, heard, and understood, both through their art and through sharing their experiences with the group.
We've covered individual and group art therapy. Now, I'm kind of curious about how these principles apply to families. Family dynamics can be really complex, and I imagine that art offers this whole new way to understand them.
You're exactly right. The book actually has a whole section on family therapy. It talks about how art can be used to uncover those really complex dynamics and communication patterns that happen within families.
I'd love to hear more about that. I'm especially interested in how the therapist actually facilitates art therapy with a whole family. Is it just a free-flowing creative session, or is there more structure to it?
It really depends on the specific needs of the family and the therapist's approach, but there are some common techniques that therapists often use. One of them is called the family mural drawing. It's basically what it sounds like. The family members all work together on this big drawing, and in that process, they end up revealing a lot about their relationships and how they communicate with each other.
So the therapist isn't necessarily interpreting the finished mural as a piece of art. They're more observing how the family interacts while they're creating it.
Yeah, exactly. The process is actually just as important, if not more so, than the final product. Like, are the family members fighting for space on the paper? Are they supporting each other's ideas? Are they trying to control the narrative? All of those interactions give the therapist these really valuable insights into the family dynamic.
The book gives an example of a mother and daughter, Frances and her mom, who created a family mural together. What did their interactions tell the therapist?
That was a really interesting dynamic to observe. Frances, the daughter, seemed really anxious about being watched while she drew. She kept making comments like, "Don't look," and "Don't watch me." She even drew a "Do not enter" sign right in the middle of the mural. And then her mom, well, she kind of surrounded all of Frances's drawings with her own, so it created this visual representation of their enmeshed relationship.
It sounds like Frances might have been feeling a lot of pressure from her mom, maybe a fear of judgment or a lack of autonomy in their relationship.
Those are really great observations. The way the mom's drawing sort of enclosed Frances's does suggest that dynamic where maybe the mom is being a little overprotective, or maybe she's struggling to give her daughter the space she needs to develop her own identity. It's a classic example of how art therapy can bring those unspoken family dynamics to the surface so the therapist can start addressing them directly.
I see. The book also talked about paired communication drawing being used in family therapy. How does that work when there's more than two people?
It can be adapted in different ways. So the book gives this example of a family with father, a mother, and two sons. The therapist paired the father with one son and the mother with the other, and they were each told to create a drawing together. That way, the therapist could observe the communication patterns in each of those parent-child pairs. And then by comparing the drawings and how they interacted, the therapist could get a sense of how those patterns played out across the whole family system.
Wow, it's like getting a double dose of insight. You see the individual relationships and the bigger picture of how those dynamics are affecting the entire family.
Yeah, exactly. It's about understanding each person as an individual, but also within the context of the whole system. And remember, these are just a couple of examples. Art therapy is really versatile, and therapists can tailor their approach to meet the unique needs of each family.
Makes sense. The book also talks about the importance of being culturally sensitive in family therapy. How does that play into art therapy specifically?
Oh, that's such an important point. Cultural norms and values can have a huge impact on family dynamics, how families communicate, and even how symbols are interpreted. Something that might represent strength in one culture could represent aggression in another. So therapists really have to be aware of those cultural differences to make sure they're not misinterpreting the family's artwork and their interaction.
It's like you're adding another layer of complexity to the detective work.
It is. But that's what makes art therapy so fascinating. It's not about finding easy answers. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's about being present, observing, and being open to the unique ways each family expresses itself.
So we talked about family murals and paired drawing. What are some other ways therapists can understand families through art?
There's this one that's really good when a family has conflicts or communication problems. It's called family sculpting.
Family sculpting, what is that?
Instead of drawing or painting, families use their bodies and the space around them to make this sculpture that represents their relationships. It's very active and everyone is involved.
So how does that work? Do they pose like statues?
Not really. It's more about where they are in relation to the other people. Like one person might be the sculptor and they actually move the other people to show what they think the family dynamic is like.
Oh, so they might put someone far away if they feel distant from the family, or right in the middle if they
Yeah.
kind of take over conversations.
Yeah. And the therapist watches how the sculpture is made, not just the final thing. How do people feel about being moved by the sculptor? Do they argue? Do they not want to do it? Do they cry? That tells us a lot about what's going on that people aren't saying.
That sounds like it could be really powerful,
Mm,
especially for families that have trouble saying how they feel.
it can be. Sometimes it's easier to show complicated feelings through movement and space than with words. Family sculpting lets those feelings come out in a safe place so they can be looked at and talked about.
Yeah, I can see that. For families that are always fighting or avoiding each other, this could be a good way to change things.
And it's not just about finding the problems, it's also about finding solutions. So after they make the first sculpture, the therapist might ask them to move around or act differently to see if they can find new ways to interact.
It's like practicing for better relationships.
Exactly. Family sculpting lets them try new ways to be with each other symbolically. It can really help with empathy, better communication, and making positive changes.
This whole conversation has been so insightful. We've seen how art can give us a glimpse into people's minds, how it can help us deal with trauma and communicate better, not just one-on-one, but in groups and with families. And we've talked about how important it is to be sensitive to different cultures.
I hope what you take away from this is that what we've learned about art therapy isn't just for therapists, it can be helpful for anyone.
I agree. Paying attention to how we express ourselves creatively and noticing the art around us in everyday life can help us understand ourselves and other people better.
And who knows, maybe this will make you want to try painting or working with clay and discover your own inner artist.
Thanks for being with us on this fascinating deep dive into the world of art therapy. We hope you learned something and maybe even feel inspired to tap into your own creativity.
Until next time, keep exploring and expressing.